Hello, I'm in front of the Teatro Real in Plaza Oriente, and I'm going to talk about the NoteBook. Behind me, I'll go slowly, behind me there is the Palazzo Real, the Royal Palace. So what is the NoteBook in the context of learning English? Or maybe any other language, but in our case we're talking about English. As the word notebook means, it's a place where to write notes. We're familiar with the paper type of booklet, a small booklet where we write notes, where we write things we want to remember. So a notebook, or the notebook in our case, is somewhere where we're going to write notes about learning English. And although a notebook can be any paper-based booklet, our notebook or the notebook should really be an electronic type of notebook. I will describe later on how to organize this sort of electronic notebook. I will describe the purpose, function and organization of this notebook, but our notebook is a concept, not necessarily a physical thing, or at least not something specific, but a concept, an idea on how to organize your language learning exercise. But first, what is the problem? What is the issue? Why do we need the notebook? Why do we need any notebook? In a way, the issue or the problem is that in our educational system we tend to be passive observers of what we're trying to learn. We have a teacher telling us what we're supposed to learn, and this is quite obvious, partly because we don't know what it is we're supposed to learn. That's why we're in a class, we're in an educational environment, because we don't know. And in the context of a language, we don't have access to the language itself. We just don't understand the language or what is being said in the language. Hence, the first function of the notebook is to turn a passive process of receiving information and trying to learn that information. The notebook should help us turn that process into an interactive process. How to turn a passive process into an interactive. So the idea of an interactive process is one where we engage with what we're trying to learn. In other words, we make it relevant for us. We are involved in the process. We're not just receivers of information, but if you like, we are creators of information. And because we're creating this information, we have a better incentive. We are better disposed, if you like, to actually learn the information. So why do we need the notebook? Why do we need to write these notes? So the second issue is that we don't want to burden ourselves trying to remember problems we encounter, things, words we encounter new words we have to remember. We have enough problems trying to learn the language, never mind trying to remember what to learn. So the notebook helps us to remember things which we don't need to remember in our mind because we write it down. So what are we going to write down in our notebook? Problems we encounter. For example, we hear somebody say a new word and we don't know what that word is. It just started raining. So it's not just words, but for example, something you wanted to say during a meeting, but you couldn't remember the word or words you wanted to say. Something you were afraid to say. Something which somebody said, but you had no idea what they're saying. You also use the new notebook to remember expressions, to remember sounds. This is why an electronic sort of note-taking process and note-taking procedure is going to be very helpful. Another thing to include in the notebook is a to-do list. A to-do list can include an action list, things which are important. This is the palace when it's raining. I think it stopped actually. And of course the notebook is there to help you revise and remember things which you included in them, which you wrote in them. That tall building is part of the Plaza España. In the background you also have the grey building. Between the brown buildings it's the Senate. Okay, so the notebook is a special type of notebook. It's not things you want to do when you're learning English or things you write down from your class when you're having classes, if you're having classes, if you have a teacher or you're taking classes, but rather from the real world, issues, problems, sounds from the real world. There's the Teatro Real in the background with the rain, as you can hear, and the umbrella. So we can have two notebooks if you like, one for real life English and the other one for your classes. This would be especially useful if you need English for your work. For example, meetings, presentations you have to attend. So the idea of the notebook is to include things which you encounter, language issues, language problems which you encounter outside your classes. So now we know why we need the notebook and how we're going to use it. So let me talk now a little bit about the actual notebook. Although the physical paper notebook is still useful, today we all have a mobile phone and it's much easier to work electronically on this one. Digital notebook does not need to be a specific application, although there are many free applications or very cheap applications. All mobile phones today come with all sorts of functions and applications that you really don't need a specific application. However, you will need to coordinate audio for recordings, video, images, photos, note-taking, and maybe a to-do list. These functions already exist in your mobile. However, you need to coordinate them with your PC to make this exercise really efficient. But as I said, all the things you need are already free in your mobile. You don't need to spend money. The most useful function will surely be the recording function. Recording as in voice recorder or recording as in video. You will need to record sounds and words which you come across. So you will need to record them, and what you're recording is the sound, not the word you think you heard, but the sound, irrespective of what is being said. This is much easier to search later on than if you try to record what you think is the word. So what you have to record are the sounds for things you don't know. For things you know and want to remember, then that's okay, you record the word. Videos are very useful, for example, during a presentation, when the person is describing a slide and you have no idea what's being said, so you just record that slide, what is being said during that slide. Behind the trees you have the Almudena Cathedral and the entrance to the tourist part of the palace. One thing I forgot to mention is the calendar or your diary in your mobile phone and emails. These are useful as well. If you are using it's raining again. If you are using the paper notebook, how do you record sounds? Simple, you just write how you would pronounce that sound in your language. Yeah, never mind English, just how it makes sense, how you can reproduce that sound in your language. Why? It's much easier for you to remember the sound than trying to remember a sound which you're not familiar with. You can use your diary, your calendar on your mobile to write to-do lists. I usually use in my calendar or diary, I use blue for appointments and red filter, and the red filter for my to-do list. So when I'm on the road, I write these things in my diary, and then they're coordinated with my PC later on. We're still in Plaza de Oriente here. The important thing about this exercise is that you have to do these things immediately you encounter them. Don't even bother trying to remember. We have more serious things in our life than just remembering problems we encounter while learning English. But you have to do it immediately. This is a closer view of the cathedral, Almudena Cathedral. And this queue is for people to enter the palace to see the permanent exhibition there. The next important thing about this exercise is to do it regularly, to pick up the habit of actually doing it. This is the parade ground in front of the palace, inside. For this exercise to work, for the notebook to work, you have to do it. You have to put things in your diary, you have to record things. So you have to start actually doing it. You have to actually put things in this notebook concept. I would imagine that within a matter of 2 months, 3 months max, you would have found a very efficient method of what to put in the notebook and how to use it. Within 3 months, you should know what is important. You should know what to put in your notebook and how to use it. Maybe later on you will develop this, not so much to learn language, but as a method, as a working method, as a workflow, part of your daily workflow of handling information. To recap this notebook idea, The first important thing is to make a passive process of learning into an interactive process of learning. The second most important thing is that to record issues, problems, new things you want to remember, things you want to do, you encounter in a real life situation. After all, what matters is real life. What matters is that you are more efficient at work when you use English. All these things you need to have access to immediately on your mobile, on your PC. This exercise is especially useful when you're at meetings or presentations and you're not sure what to say, what to do, what words to use, so you don't do anything. At the first moment you have, write down or record your reflections, what you wanted to say, and then you know that in the future this is something you have to practice. So in the end, you have to make the learning process relevant for you, interesting for you. And the notebook can help you achieve that by not having to remember, not having to feel bad about something because you don't know it, because now you know you can do something about it. You can write it down, forget it, and when you can solve your problem. It's also a good exercise to refresh what you know already, what you've just learned, and to remember, and maybe even to do your preparations for a meeting, for a presentation, for a trip, because you know that all your English things are in the same place. So once you pick up the habit, then you can decide what is important for you and what is relevant and how efficient you can make the system. So this is Lawrence from in front of the Royal Palace in Madrid on a rather rainy day. Thank you and goodbye.